Kibra is the largest slum in East Africa. More than 1 million people live here. Among the inhabitants are the Nubians, who are the original settlers and have been claiming the right to Kibra for decades. Others consider the Nubians as foreigners and thus have no right to the land. In order to understand the history of Kibra, we have to understand the history of the Nubians. Who are the Nubians, and how did they end up in Kibra?
The Nubians in Kenya were brought in by the British. Call it the Imperial British East Africa Limited Company or whatever, and also call it the King's Africans Rifles. Now these people were settled in Kibra in the year 1901, and they served in the British government, King's Africans Rifles, and were stationed at Bula Camp. And because the army required that their services, what happened is that they were given this place in Kibra as Sudanese soldiers. The idea was mostly for Kibra to act like a paddock, where they can get the services whenever they wished to obtain such services. Some of the people were in service, and some of them had retired, so they had to settle. Their request to be repatriated to the Sudan was rejected way back in 1933, and there is some documentary evidence to that effect. And it has come to pass that we recognized that the British did not have any intention of repatriating the Sudanese soldiers who had served them. We also, since that time, learned that their major aim was that because of the number, that within a very short time, living with the people around here, the Sudanese people or the soldiers would be assimilated, and they would eventually lose their identity. And it is for this reason that the British never gave the Sudanese soldiers any identity, neither did the subsequent Kenyan government also recognize the soldiers. They didn't recognize the Sudanese in spite of the fact that the numbers started growing. And instead of being assimilated, the Sudanese intermarried with the people in Kenya and assimilated them. So they became the Sudanese, referred to now as the Nubians. So this is the problem. That the British government never gave us any recognition, and this was also followed by subsequent Kenyan governments which have not given us recognition. As a matter of fact, if you looked at the census, population census in Kenya, you will find all other tribes listed, but the Nubians are all lumped together into a group that is referred to as others. Yes, the reason was that if you went back to the Sudan now, you will find yourself completely displaced. Because if you're talking about from 1890s when they first came in, up to 1933 when they requested to go back, that was already 43 years. And in 43 years, a lot of things must have changed in the Sudan. So what the British were doing was actually avoiding repatriating problems back home because they would have to resettle them. Whereas here, they considered them already settled, although they never gave them any title to the land that they were occupying, a major cause of problems in the future. Now, this land, up to 1963, that is before the Kenyan independence, was owned exclusively by the Nubians up to that time. There were, of course, some other tribes, Kenyan tribes, like the Kikuyu, for instance, who have been with the Nubians for as long as most of us can remember. But then, the Nubians at that time, because of non-recognition, were now divided. As a matter of fact, quite a number of them still harbored the thought of going back to the Sudan. And as such, they did not vigorously follow up land ownership. For instance, like the Indians did. The Indians were much more enlightened. And the Nubians, very religious people, very African in thinking. In fact, when asked, why didn't you apply for land? Or why didn't you buy land? You see, this is God's land. Why should we buy? We're already here and we are occupying the place. And to all intents and purposes, it is our land. That was issue number one. Issue number two, even the government at that time realized that Kibra was for the Nubians. And if you mention to anybody, then, and even now, if you mention that you come from Kibra, they ask you straight away, are you a Nubian? So you see, that land ownership, de facto, had been given by the people. But de jure, legally, they don't have any ownership of that land. They have all the time been referred to as squatters. So the Nubians have been squatting on this land for the past 103 years now.
Baba they would they 26,908.
Hiyo malodi yako ufogo.
Kutoka kan kazu kibir.
Isakto no bijeni zaman zaidi.
Hata utaka ndini utaite pekee simutoka sana kama. Kale fi mashamba hili mabagara, magala moyo kula jande mafasade. Makana ka bagara ba ku fogo ma makaga la mo ba ku fogo ma makan ku je foga bil fogo chua wana zera ma fara wen na gasa do kila administration ajibu moni kila gasa da kifo ke mode makanta serikali zede tukumeni kwa uwezo yote na makanta serikali. Sasa shanga makanda kana udila wazee
Mono ya udina wazee
British wapata ila kukata jeshi 1902 1908 wasakata jeshi dushman 1914 dushman 1939 to 46
asma toka mono
Sale Farahan Kabatai Kibra de British wadile Nubi
naam
makan tumun tekjir anta kala dushman khalas asay bodiki shunu pass gradi pass ta Kibra
naam
tabjesh fi Kibra hini lakini mkuta nas kanini
naam
the reserve
ايوه
كان دشمان تلا مرة ثانية عسكرية تمر في جيري
نعم
اسمع ويتار فازو كانوا جوكم مكان
نعم
كاسو كما جيري تاكي
ايوه
تو بس هذو كلام كتير
ايوه
هاتي شنو أساتو الديتنا شنو ما
نعم
سنو أبو حكم
ايوه
هو خاص كم جين مكان ده جين كان سبجكت بريتش
ايوه نعم
أجان تينو كله بريتش
ايوه
سواء كده تينيا
نعم
كاسانجي تاولا كبيرة كان كده جين تباسرنا تحاجة تنتا لابد أكيد
ايوه
نخاص جين ده مكان سانا أبو حكم مكان ده بريتش كانجي تاولا كينيا خاص ممكن إنه جين كم مكان ده رزافتا كتوم باغارا غلامو كلا حاجة
ايوه
بس لو بيجينا كده ما فاضل بس أنا أزو تاتو دي ولا شو كان سيدي مكان دي سيدي مكان دي
Waltazana ngurauza picha takizubere
Gurauza. Deka ndafika mofa America.
The business.
Business.
Mulena 1930 1915 tariki talata
ايوه
February 1915 lakini Kibra binu ini kabiro de mina bidu 1912 1902
1902 ya Kibrabi ya wedi lomon
ya wadi no mono de reserve anas mona kan wazee wadi na keno kedar jumo mona zarja ingilis kelum no to ko magarar je bele to ko bijeni ni to ko do reserve kan kalam bijeni na mar kalam bije saya tu ma fa nasanal ne baligo to ko mo guru to ko digi gen menin ya binu wadi na mon Kibra de feminin Kibra de zaman wadi nene de mo wadi sakar jere Kibra de kan zaman wadi na wazee kila zulma ekatomon mashamba kibiri kila bakano mashamba ukano wazee gilipa kila bakano wale kan mgilipa shilingi 90 kila sana wangilipa shilingi 90
kea
mon fikea ya kan mon ya gina dimon ya kan wasitene de takibra de kul gina dimon satke
monja masika ya tu
na magdirar wadi ndeke tiri monje siga tokura monje man kura na mintala fi Sudan na mandrofu Uganda re jama Uganda na manjini na mon waro le Portuguese mo kura min Gulf Coast de tayni ni Gulf Coast de ne Gulf Coast de min fu geri fu minini fu Gulf Coast de Kibra binin jede to ya binin filan shaba Kibra ro filan shaba Jitalo menshabaro zede ro filindi era tala ro fulangata arjelifu ro sarangombe. Arje sarangombe era je nina fito ini kambi. Bukan ya bakana sere moy nyakam ke bir ya moy nyakam de ya wori kan bakan tene te live kudu te golf ma tene te football ya kan bakan wadi min 1998 min 1918 ya kan fito ide kambi de to ide ya bakana sere moy sudu de ya kan wadi bakan tene te football wodi ya kan kiwanje tene te golf kasuru bes kilometer kumwasa kumtu wala ta shamba to mun melipa wala mun ta je Kibra ma lipa shamba ta nas wala limosin jode wodi ne kum na la jode kam tam gilipa ayo wodi ne kum ketum gen sana tinin su dikan sana tinin tam kene malipa nginde kum bije lipa am sa la da sa di gilipa ayo
Alan shui. Assalamu alaikum. Alan كيف بwana? فين بwana? ايوه. السلام عليكم. عليكم السلام. فين بwana? ايوه.
Well, I was born in a place called the Yonte in Somaliland when it was still part of Kenya in 1919. In 1926, when British thought he should give Italy portion of that area we're living in as a compensation for helping British in the World War, they took over our area, west bank of River Juba. That was British side. It was British East Africa, it was not Kenya at that time. And they gave that to Italy, and that, from that time it was called Italian Somaliland, and he was shifted from there because he volunteered to remain with British. And we came with them here. They brought us here to Kenya, Mombasa, and we sent us to Mazeras, where they gave us some acreage, about 2 acres a person, for settlement, in a place which was supposed to be a crown land at that time. Our plight in Kenya is deplorable, because our presence here is not our choice. We have been made to come here, and we are supposed to be given all possible amenities that we can live as human beings. But before independence, when the place was called Kibra, was a bush, and they took us there. They took our people there to colonize the place, to clear the place. They have made the place, and now it is ready. Now, in independence, a lot of people have invaded the area, and have narrowed the Sudanese people. Now, out of the 4,000 acres that were there, there's about 400 acres left. You can't distribute all these things. So all our plight is that if British is very, very sincere, and it's not our choice that we are here, they should think of either giving us an alternative place.
يا برا فين؟
يا برا
يا برا.
كان دخل في الجيش 1937. شمال 1939 لما قال في الجيش شغالات.
ايوه. تدش من فوق.
عنديش من فوق.
نعم. تدش من وين؟
عنديش من في
tele Somali andini خلاص نعيشوا مع طلياني نعرف بقى في مقديشو عرفوا بقى في جيجا عرفوا بقى في سافتا جرداء وإنهم بقى دي سبابة يوم تاري نور موسيقى تغاريسا
ايوه
يوم تاري نرجع سيقى لودو يوم بقى ما جاس موتو جيما
نعم
نرجع بقى في لاجرودو
نعم
هنا الكتو كان بيتين هنا سدشمان خلاص تصومالي تطلياني ذكرى نار جايني الجنة جار جايني هاي نار جا شمال الجانزة ساقوة مدغاسكر دشمان كالس نار جايني نجي جينا كما سأل دشمان العنزة الثاني في باما
ايوه
هنا تالي نروح في إنديا نتلف في إنديا وصل في إنديا هنا نجي panda meli na makanga ya marishita gom ya sibishita gom bina na dakhala sede tawali na bukana ma Japanese sana wana tale ina rene fi India astagfirullah nenezi fi Ceylon azgandi Sri Lanka nege fi Ceylon na enya tala fi Ceylon na jura fi India
Ndio 1930 Usmati hata 1930 1939 mpaka 1945 Turo Fabsinia ro fajirini di wani ndio na gidang gidor
Abyssinia ma bele kani atu
Absini Turo la di Fasmara Tiridawa Djibouti Mogadisho Gidi bele Milana noro ogon
Battalion takum kani atu
ne kan First African Light Battery First African Light Battery na fogo la de geri ne kan fogo direba kam direba tinashar
wa nasta ninde kan tawen
ana fa dinde wa kamba ana salta gi ana salta direba ji lakin ne kan direba ta direba ta juru to le light battery mzinga وفي عسكري القدروا مزينجري ونلقين تدريبه
ايوه
اسمنا الاسمانو نلسمان ما ايطاليا نعم يلا ما جابان
جابان تام دشمان مو
جامان دي دشمان ليو جامان زمان قبل
ايوه
زمان 1914
ما 18
14 to 18 نعم ده توازي لكن تنين دي 1939 to 45
Japanese da kaman mon kan jala di Abyssinia ni wala
ma wode ro na mon na fa jene na joto mon na mon ma jeni Abyssinia de kan terlian
Amida kitu sole Amida tani kijami
Nadi Amirahan Said Singi Okan Sigi nolta tekea zaman di Darfur bele to mon di Darfur mon tala min Darfur min Tawila kina di Tawila asede mon li sayala nas mama to mon mababa to mon pide Kibra minini gara ya pide kea ya mo tari minna bas mon pi ma kwana to mon pi adami ma Milan moro fi garaya sad mon gar ja mon buro fi garaya mon gar ja be ya je ni Kibra asede baka mon ki jar ja moro fi garaya Arabi je shulu. Arabi je stenu mon me English kusika.